welcome to Revelations of Delusional Knitter podcast. This is a tutorial series, and today we're going to talk about Turkish spindles. I got this Turkish spindle from Riley Wood and Fiber Arts on Etsy, and it comes in this lovely bag. Now, if you have just purchased a Turkish spindle, or you had one shipped to you, it's probably unassembled. So if you have a Turkish spindle, you should have 3 parts. You should have 2 arms and a shaft. Here's the shaft. And you have 1 thin arm and 1 thick arm. To assemble your spindle, insert the thinner arm into the thicker arm, and there will be a hole that you want to line up. And when you line up that hole, then you will put the shaft in. Typically the bottom of the shaft is thicker than the top. And don't force it down, just let it sit. Now we have a spindle. Now in order to start spinning, you want to attach a leader, which we'll go over in a moment. I'm going to do that more as a close-up. And then we're going to go on to starting to spin and attaching your fiber supply. And then we're going to go into 2 different ways to spin, worsted and woolen. Then I will show you throughout how to wind on. My most favorite thing about Turkish spindles is that once you've spun up your singles, the way the Turkish spindle works, it doesn't have a round whorl like most spindles. It has these 2 arm sets. And when you wind on your singles or your plied yarn, you end up with a center pole ball. So once you've spun your singles, you can actually get that center pole ball off the spindle and start plying directly from it, with no other preparation necessary, and that's what I love about the Turkish spindle. So hold on, and then we'll attach our leader and start spinning. Now we want to attach a leader to our spindle, so take some commercial yarn. You can also use hand spun or whatever you have available, but I like to use leftover bits of commercial yarn. And we want a loop to do this, so I'm going to take the end here and I'm going to do a simple overhand knot, to connect the yarn and make it one long loop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spindle, and it doesn't matter which end you put on the end of the spindle. I like to use the end that has the knot on it because I don't want to see it again. That's just my preference. So you want to put your spindle through the loop there. And then you want to start to wind it on a bit to attach it, and this is how you wind on a Turkish spindle. You always go over 2, under 1. I like to catch that annoying leftover tail there so I don't see it again. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Now the other thing with a Turkish spindle, they don't all have this notch. This one has a notch in it. Doesn't matter if you have the notch or not, because you're going to do a half hitch. And to do a half hitch, you just want to make a loop with the working bit coming out from under that loop. So I grasp the yarn, have 2 fingers, make a loop, stick the tip of the spindle through it, and pull it tight. And again, mine goes right in that notch there, but if you don't have a notch, the half hitch will still work and will stay steady. And I'll do that again, closer. So I have my yarn just resting over my hand. I'm going to use 2 fingers. I'm going to flip my fingers over and insert the tip of the spindle there, let go, pull tight, and you have a half hitch. And now, as you can see, the spindle will spin and the half hitch will stay where it is. The easiest way to get started spinning is to use the park and draft method. And in order to show you that, you need to see my lap. So what we're going to do is we're going to spin the spindle and build up twist. Now the traditional way to spin singles is clockwise, and you ply counterclockwise. Doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as when you apply you do the opposite of your singles. I know the other day I was spinning something, I was doing another little sample, I had plied up that sample, and then I noticed I begun spinning the next sample singles counterclockwise. By the time I figured that out, it was too late, so I just continued on, and then I plied them clockwise. So that's fine. So you want to build up some twist into your leader. And park and draft is exactly what it sounds like. So now we have built up some twist in our leader. And I'm going to park the spindle. With the Turkish spindle, you can actually just set it down and it won't back on itself because the arms actually provide enough tension to stop it from back spinning. If you have a top whirl spindle, you probably want to put the shaft in between your knees to hold it securely. Just resting it, it'll probably still spin backwards. But with the Turkish spindle, the arms actually provide enough tension to hold it down. So what we're going to do now is get our fiber supply and attach it to the leader. And I will do that as a close-up so you can actually see what I'm doing. But now you can see all of the built-up twist that's in the leader. So I have here a little fiber sample from Loop that I received when I purchased a bump. And what you want to do with your fiber, you can have top, you can have fluff. This is just fluff. But you want to pre-draft a little bit to make it easier on yourself when you're spinning. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear off a chunk here and pre-draft it. Pre-drafting is getting some air and some space into the fiber so you're not fighting with it when you're drafting. So you just want to grab both ends and pull. You don't want to pull it apart. You just want to get some space in there that you have to work with. I'm just going to pull this apart a little bit. I'm going to make an end here that I can attach to the fiber supply. So here I have my spindle that we already inserted some twist into, and I want to get my finger in this end loop here, and I'm probably going to add a little bit more twist. I'm going to park it. You don't necessarily have to park it on your lap. Right here I'm parking it on a table, and I have my loop here. So I want to take this loop and I'm going to insert the end of the fiber and I'll fold it over on itself, and then I can let that twist go into that fiber and secure it. Now that's secured. And now that that's secured, I can begin spinning. Once you have your yarn fiber attached to your leader, you want to take up some of the slack on your leader by winding it. And to do that, you go over 2, under 1, 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 and then you want to create a half hitch again. Now at this point, you want to make sure that you're keeping a pinch on your fiber supply so that you're not letting the twist enter the fiber that you have yet to spin. So now creating your half hitch becomes slightly more difficult, but not too much. So you want to get where you're going to put your half hitch. You want to take some fingers and flip them over, create your half hitch, and then pull till it's secure. Now we have a half hitch. So now you can start your spindle going again. Pinch off, draft, let the twist enter your fiber supply, spin, pinch off, draft, and then let the twist enter your fiber supply, spin, pinch, draft, and let the twist enter. And every time your spindle stops and starts going back again, you need to give it another flick and get it going in the right direction. Pinch, draft. Now at this point we're getting a good consistency. When you first start, it's always a little lumpy and bumpy. Pinch, my spindle has stopped. I'm going to flick it again. Oh, way off camera. Pinch, draft, let the twist enter, pinch and draft, and we're just going to keep doing that. This particular method is worsted, where you pinch off and you draft out and then let the twist enter this triangle bit. Here, woolen is where you let the twist enter up into your drafting zone. Now I'm going to take up some of the slack here that's been left off. So over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and continue. You want to leave yourself a little bit to go with. So here I've got about a foot. Make your half hitch again. And now here you can see we have a nice consistent single. The beginning's always a little bit rough. So we want to get our spindle going. Pinch, draft. Now this is more of a woolen bit where you let the twist enter the fiber supply and then smooth it out as you go. Spin. So how do you correct mistakes? At this point, I've let a little too much twist up into my fiber supply, and I want to correct that. So up until about this point, it looks good. This is just my personal trick. I will take the good yarn and wind it up onto the shaft, like this. And then I let my fiber supply hang, and you'll see it will untwist itself. And it'll get all that extra twist out of the fiber supply. Then I can start again and draft it out the correct amount that matches so that I have a consistent spin. Because here I have a pretty consistent grist of yarn. And then here you can see I get a lumpy bit. So I want to get that lumpy bit out. So I'm going to do this and draft out a bit till I have the same amount as I did in the rest of what I was spinning. And now this is untangled so I can continue. So you want to pinch off right here where we ended with our lumpy bit, and then you want to just unwind that from your spindle. And what I do, which you can't see because it's behind the camera, is this extra fluff that's hanging around, I just rest up over my arm so it doesn't get caught up in the spindle. And we can continue to draft out our yarn and let the twist enter. And now we have a nice consistent single again. Since we've already drafted this out once before, I'm not going to pull on it too much. It's already drafted to the right thickness. I'm just going to let the twist enter it. And now we're back to where it's a little inconsistent. And the other thing I like to do, once I have a length that I'm going to wind onto the spindle, I give it one last twist to just add some more twist in it, because when you ply, you're going to remove some of that twist. So I like to put a little bit extra in there before I wind it on. And now we're going to wind on. So you take your half hitch and you slide it off the tip, and then you go over 2, under 1, 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 over 2, under 1. And you want to leave yourself a bit of a length so that you can make your half hitch again. And you do want to see this. These pigtails, you do want that happening, because that means you have enough twist to hold the yarn together when you ply it. So now we have our half hitch again, and we can continue to spin. If you do have twist that entered up into your fiber supply, while your spindle is spinning, you can untwist this bit draft, and then let the twist go back into it. That's how you get it so that you don't have big, huge, lumpy bits all the time. Spin. This is a little too thick. Untwist it and draft. Let the twist go in. Pinch off. Spin. Pinch. Untwist. Draft. This is where park and draft comes in good if you're a new spinner, because you can park the spindle before it starts back spinning. Draft, the twist enter, untwist this bit, draft. That's how you spin. So now, what do you do if you've spun this huge length of yarn all the way to the floor and you can't wind it on because it keeps kinking up on itself? You use what's called a butterfly. So I'm going to grasp my spindle to hold the tension on this length of yarn that I've spun, and I'm going to make a butterfly. Now I have unattached my fiber supply, but typically it would probably still be attached. But as you can see, the yarn is kinking up on itself and it makes it difficult to wind sometimes. So I'm going to use what's called a butterfly. And I'm not sure I do the butterfly in the traditional way, but it's what works for me. So I'm going to pinch off here, as you can see. Any spinner knows you always pinch off and never let go, unless somebody has a gun to your head, because you don't want the twist entering your fiber supply. I did show you how to fix that if that happens by letting it unwind, but it's just better if you don't let it happen. So let's make a butterfly. I'm going to continue to hold my index finger and thumb to stop the twist from going into the fiber supply or untwisting here because I've unattached the fiber supply. I'm going to use my middle finger and pinky finger to make the butterfly, and my ring finger is going to act as a tensioning device. And here's how you make the butterfly. You go over my pinky, over my middle, over my pinky, over my middle, over my pinky, over my middle, and that's your butterfly, because it essentially makes butterfly wings. And I'm going to keep going over and over and over and over until I am back up to my spindle here. Then I need to undo my half hitch again so I can wind on. So I'm going to use my middle finger to undo my half hitch. And now I can wind on with my butterfly. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Now I'm up to my butterfly. So I'm just going to let that slide off my pinky and off my middle finger. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Again, I'm just going to continue to let them slide off those fingers. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Now they both slid off, but that's okay, because I don't have much left here. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. And now I have just enough left to make another half hitch. Now what if I want to stop for now? And I don't want to spin any more today. Here's what I would do. I would make a half hitch, and then I would wind it in the same orientation that I was spinning, so clockwise. I would just wind it onto the shaft, and then I can let go. And you could have your fiber still attached here and just let it go. Winding it on there will stop the twist from entering your fiber supply. Okay, now that we've gone over the basics, I wanted to show you spinning comfortably, because while showing close-ups, I was behind the camera and making sure that I was in focus of the camera while I was doing it. And now I'd like to show you spinning while doing it in a comfortable setting, and also how to create a join. So right here, I've disconnected my fiber supply from my spindle. So what I'm going to do, I have this little bit of fluff left here, and I have my next fiber supply, and I'm just going to lay the two over each other and hold them and draft them together, and that will reconnect the fiber to the spindle. And I'm going to undo what I had resting. I'm going to take this and lay it over my arm so that it doesn't get tangled up in the spindle. I'm going to spin, and I'm going to draft, and let the fiber supply enter the twist, spin, draft out, and let the twist enter, pinch off, spin, and this is how I spin normally on the spindle. And it works quite well. You don't have to spin this much. I keep hitting the spindle off my leg because I don't usually sit like this. And I'm just going to keep drafting and letting the twist enter the drafting zone. That is the drafting triangle that you always hear people talking about. Spin and draft. And what you want to do with your fiber supply is, I've read the best example was hold it like a baby bird. So I am barely holding this because I want the fibers to be able to come out of the fiber supply. So I have very little grasp on the fiber supply. My right hand, though, is held pretty tight because I don't want twist going into the fiber supply before I want it to. I want to be able to draft out the amount that I want before it enters the yarn. Now, right now my spindle is almost at the ground. I can barely hold it up to spin. I'm going to give it one last flick to let some more twist go in before I wind it on. And then I'm going to use the butterfly again because I have a lot now. So I can't wind it on. There's a lot there. So I'm going to butterfly that. Like so. I'm going to undo my half hitch off the spindle. Then I'm going to line over 2, under 1, 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 forever. And now I have enough left over to make a half hitch again. I'm going to do that. There's my half hitch, and then I can continue spinning. I'm going to draft, let the twist enter, draft, let the twist enter, draft, let the twist enter. Spindle's getting a little slow. So once you get going, you can actually make a lot of yarn very quickly with a spindle. I didn't believe it until I got good at the spindle. I always thought wheels were quicker. And I thought spindles were slower because you have to stop and wind on and do all that until I got really fast at the spindle. The other thing I like about the spindle, because sometimes I have a problem with my left shoulder, is the fact that I'm stopping and doing a different physical motion. Actually helps with my shoulder problems because I'm not in the same position for an extended period of time. I have to stop and wind it on, and that changes things up a bit. The other thing you want to do is always make sure that your fiber supply doesn't get caught up in your yarn. If it does, and it starts getting wrapped around, take your spindle and spin it in the opposite direction, and it'll unwind it from your fiber supply. It's really scary when that happens, but if you stop quickly and unwind it, then you'll be okay. I'm going to do another butterfly. I'm going to undo my half hitch. I'm going to wind on. And again, say I want to stop now, I'm done for the day. I'm going to go as far as I can. I'm going to make a half hitch. And I'm going to wind on what's left of the yarn up to the shaft so that it doesn't enter my fiber supply. And now I'm good to stop. So at this point, some time has passed, and I am almost done spinning up my singles from my fiber sample. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to ply a 2-ply on the spindle. And I'm also going to show you my favorite thing about the Turkish spindle, which is that when you're done and you pull the cop off, it's actually a center pull ball that you can ply directly from without having to do any other preparation to your singles to get them ready to ply. So let me finish spinning my singles here, and then I'll come back with a close-up on how to remove the cop. Now I'm done spinning my singles, and all I did was undo my half hitch and wind on till the end, and then I just let it rest there on the cop. So to remove the cop from your spindle, what you want to do is take the arms off, and if you wound it correctly, the bottom should look like that, all nice and even, and the top is going to be a little higher, but the bottom, if it's wound this way, it will unwind easily without tangling. So we want to remove the arms from the shaft, and then take the thinner arm and pull it out of the center, and then you can take the thick arm and pull the ball right off. And depending on how tightly you wound, that may be easier or more difficult. And you want to keep track of your ends. So here's one end, and then the other end is going to be the leader that we started with. I'm actually going to use the leader as my leader for plying, because why not? It's already on there. So now I'm going to put my spindle back together. So that I can start plying from it. And I'm going to take my leader and put it back on. And wind it on a bit. And then I want to leave a little bit of room so that I can add some twist in there for the plying. So I'm going to do my half hitch. And now we're going to spin counterclockwise, because we spun our singles clockwise and we want to go in the opposite direction for our plying. So I'm going to add some twist in there. You saw the clockwise untwisted, and now we've twisted counterclockwise. And now here's my loop where I started. So now what I want to do is I want to take, that's going to be one single, and I want to find my other one, which is here, and I want to put them together and fold them over each other. This is always so much easier when you're not trying to do it in front of a camera. So here they are folded on top of each other. Now I can let some of that twist in there, and we're starting to ply our yarn. So the next thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a handle on your ball here. We have two plies coming from it. So how I usually hold it is very gently, because I want it to be able to unwind. And then I stick a finger in between the two plies so that they don't get tangled while I'm trying to ply them, and the twist goes in as I want it to and not when it wants to. So now I'm going to pause, and I'm going to go back to a different angle so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So to ply, what you want to do, as I said before, is hold your ball gently and keep some tension between the two singles and let it enter as you want to for an even ply. If you encounter a problem and the ply is too loose, what you can do is park your spindle, pull your two plies apart, and it'll start getting tighter down here. Then you want to pinch off where it was good, and then give your spindle another flick, and then continue on. Plying goes much faster than spinning because you're not worried about how much fiber is getting in there. You just want to make sure that the ply is even. You just want to keep tension on the singles so that everything is even and it doesn't get away from you. It's pretty easy because the energy in the singles makes it want to ply together. Sometimes you run into a problem where it kinks up on itself like that. Again, just park your spindle, backtrack, and then pull tighter on the singles and let them ply. Then we're going to wind on the same way we did when we were doing singles. I don't usually butterfly because we're making a plied yarn now. It's more balanced and it doesn't really want to kink up on itself too much. You do want a little bit of back kinking because once you finish it and wash it or knit with it, some of that energy is going to be released. So you wind on like we did before. Make your half hitch as usual, and then continue plying again. The same thing goes if you want to stop. You take off what you've plied so far, wind on as far as you can. Make your half hitch, and then since we're plying counterclockwise, wind counterclockwise onto the shaft, and I usually go a little bit past where I've plied so far and then let go. Then the plied energy won't go further into the ball, and then you can set it down. Once you've finished plying, you can start knitting directly because it's a center pole ball, or you can skein up your yarn and wash it and finish it. And you now have yarn. Thanks so much for joining me for this tutorial. I hope that if you haven't spun before, you now can. And I hope that if you've spun before, maybe I taught you some tricks. I'm the Delusional Knitter, Angela. Please come join the podcast board, Revelations of Delusional Knitter podcast on Ravelry. My blog is delusionalknitter.blogspot.com, and you can reach me at Gmail, delusionalknitter@gmail.com. Thanks again and happy spinning.